listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Week 5 preview for Monday, September 30th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
And the clock rolls right along. We are up to, say it out loud, Week 5 of the NFL. Brian Blessing in Las Vegas. We love talking NFL. We love our Monday segments. We get the first opinion from the odds makers. We turn to our go-to guy, Jack from BookMaker. It is scary, isn't it, Jack? Do you feel this way, or is it me? Getting long in the tooth maybe is part of the equation. But it's Week 5. Before you know it, the season's going to be half over. Then we'll be turning for home. We'll be talking about who's, lining up for the playoffs. It's nuts.
No, it goes by very quickly.
And some wild results, injuries, a lot to talk about, kind of in a recap mode from yesterday, which absolutely has an impact on the games that lie ahead. And we start with the Thursday night game, Jack. Rams in Seattle. Interesting game. Seattle's a 1-point favorite. The total on the game is 49. The one thing we talk about, Jack, is that home field advantage, the 12th man up in Seattle. For starters, what is that worth?
Probably a point. I mean, if you take generically that each home field advantage is 3, and then mold it a little for each individual team, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, I would say it's probably 4 for Seattle.
So I guess the easiest way we would figure that out, we'd probably be, looking at the Rams 3.5, 4 on a neutral field?
I think that would be about fair assessment. Yes, sir.
Okay. The Rams, unbelievable. Their defense just flat out could not stop Tampa Bay. Seattle took care of business against Arizona. That game with Tampa Bay, it's a football game. But does it have an impact on power ratings per se for them to have such defined chinks in the armor, or was it just a one-off?
I'm going to say it's a one-off, unless they come back this week and Seattle does the same thing to them. It was a day where Winston was on fire. The receivers were catching everything they came close to. And if you look at the Rams, their three previous games, they gave up 343, 244, and 270. Yesterday, out of the blue, 464. They were a 9-point favorite. People bet them like they were 9-point favorites. And it was a big game for the place in the way of teasers. But
what we've seen the last, I keep saying it's about 2 years now. I think that's about right. I don't think you go back 3 years. But the NFL was just the NFL. And week to week, you'd see a half point here, a half point there, based on a result. But the last 2 years, the NFL market has turned so volatile based on a Sunday game and then the next week's numbers. So I'm curious here. If the Rams had played and beat Tampa Bay, 31-20, or just like not getting rolled like that, giving up all those points. Or maybe the better question is, last week, what would the total on this game have been?
Well, when we put this game up on Saturday, we put the Rams up at 2-48.
Okay.
Now we reopened it at 2, and people bet it down to Seattle, the favorite, a 1-point favorite, and the total they bet it up just a little to 49.
Fair enough. Now we go to this one. Is this will be interesting. Baltimore is at Pittsburgh, and what are you looking at here on the road, Jack? 3.5, 4.
Baltimore, as of Saturday, they were a 4-point favorite, 3.5 and 42.5. Prior to yesterday's games, they were bet up to 4 and 42.5. And now we'll wait to put it back up again after Pittsburgh plays this evening.
All right, this would be the rub that poor Jack. If you got a violin out there, pull out your little violin and play it for Jack. Because all of a sudden, after a decade of basically just saying, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, make the home team 3, now poor Jack and his team have to do some work. Right? It was always Baltimore, Pittsburgh, hang 3, and it would never move.
You're right. And now Roethlisberger is not Roethlisberger. He's out injured. Baltimore is improving. And basically your adjustment is 7 points, and that seems about right.
When would you take will you take this game down prior to as the game's being played tonight?
Yes. Matter of fact, we had it up prior to yesterday. We'll keep it down now until tomorrow. All right. And this may be interesting. What number did you have last week? And there are gray areas now. What is the consideration for Chicago and Oakland?
Oakland, impressive road, or forgive me, Chicago, Oakland in England.
Right.
But Oakland, solid road win at Indianapolis. Bears defense, a flat-out monster, and they win the game with Chase Daniel at quarterback because Trubisky is not there.
This game was Chicago 7-41 in England. And after the injury, we reopened it at 6.5. Obviously, people are backing Oakland. We're down to 4.5. I assume it's on the quarterback downgrade, but I'm telling the truth, the way the year has progressed, I think they may be overcompensating.
They may, but the one thing that's interesting, though, right? The total hasn't moved.
No, the total remained the same. And that is a fascinating point there.
Intriguing. Well, listen, Chase Daniel is, and he's one of these guys where we talk to you all through the summer months. We talk about Chase Daniel's a preseason machine. He's a guy you can make money on in 4 preseason football games. He came in. I don't think he looked great, but between you and me and all our listeners, I didn't think he looked that much worse than Trubisky. I don't know what you think.
No, that's why we opened it back up at 6.5. That was our impression. I mean, it wasn't that he looked great. Trubisky has not looked great this season.
That's a fair point. Then we go to Arizona, Cincinnati, and we're waiting to see the result of the Monday night game. Bengals in that 4.5 range, total 48.5.
We opened Cincinnati 4 and 48.5. Currently, it's 4 minus 15.
There you go.
When we closed it yesterday, it was 4 minus 15 and 48.
Watching Kyler Murray against Seattle, it was kind of a weird game. It was watching Murray and Wilson run around and make plays. Murray is pretty electric. There's still the learning curve going on for him. I'd be very curious. Let me ask you this way, Jack. How closely do you watch a team like Arizona with Murray on a week-to-week basis? Because it stands to he still makes a lot of good plays, decision-making, and it's still the Cardinals. But I think with each passing week, this kid's going to get better, and you can see the ability is there. And there are going to be these games when he wows people.
And he does have wow moments. The wow games, aside from the Detroit game, he was all right against Baltimore, and he was all right yesterday. He hasn't been sensational yet, and his problem is he needs to be sensational because that defense is so porous. So
when you watch the Monday night game with the Bengals and how this all pans out, when you're going to rehang the number, more often than not, Jack, are you putting it back up where it was and ready to, you're sitting there anticipating and move very quickly, or are you prone to say, oh, we know we're going to get pumped here and move something on air just based on what people watched?
Barring a key injury, we would hang it up. If Cincinnati looked great tonight, it might be 5. If Cincinnati looked poor, it might be 3. And then the public will probably overreact to our reaction.
Okay. And then Jacksonville and Carolina, the battle of the backups. How about this story with Minshew and Allen? And we're looking at the Panthers 3.5. Total on the game is 41. Man, you guys probably I can see you guys now like you're in a library with manuals and going, oh, how do we evaluate these two guys? They've played well.
They have played well. Kyle Allen wasn't as good as the week before, but he wasn't facing the Arizona defense like he was the week before. He did a credible performance. They have McCaffrey. At this point, and I may be alone saying this, there's not much difference between a banged-up Cam Newton and Kyle Allen. So for me, there's no adjustment at all. Now, when you go to the other side, Foles got hurt so early in the year that basically this has been the substitutes team, and he's played well at moments. He had a big comeback yesterday. He doesn't move great in the pocket, but he moves well enough in a Brady's type, not as Brady, but in a Brady type fashion, a slow mover with subtle moves, and then he gets the ball out.
Yeah, the one thing I would anticipate here is, correct me if I'm wrong, Minshew takes him on the road, drives him down and gets the win. Kind of a crazy finish. I would think this number gets to 3, or at least 3s appear. Whether it bounces off 3, but I got a funny feeling this thing gets on 3 and maybe not moves off 3 once it gets there. So if you're inclined to take the points, I would say do it early.
Well, they're a little late now because we opened 4 and we're down to 3 minus 20.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You're ahead of the curve. most markets still seeing that 3.5. So obviously makes sense. I think that what the level of interest is on this game, Jack, remains to be seen. But that is a game I think could generate some really good two-way action.
Oh, it certainly should. And I feel sorry for Denver yesterday. They're 0-4. They've lost 2 games at home on the last play of the game.
Oh, it's like, yeah, at some point, is it a punch to the gut or do they get mad? Minnesota and the Giants, Minnesota 4.5, 5, and that's in that dead zone where that could really be volatile. What was the thought process, the opener, and where you sit now?
We opened at 6. The Giants looked all right yesterday, but again, consider their opposition was Washington, coming off being Washington and coming off a short week. And everybody's on Gruden watch right now for when he's going to be out of there. And Minnesota, as you said, they were manhandled by the Chicago defense. And Minnesota never plays well against 500 teams. However, they're facing a team, the Giants are 500, but they're a phony 500 team. So I think this game goes back up to 6, even though it's down to 5 with us and 4.5 in some places.
And what was the thought on the total?
The total was yesterday, there was money for the Giants over. And yesterday, again, playing Washington with Case Keenum, who they had to ultimately move out of there and bring in the kid from Harris from Ohio State. The points weren't there. Jones looks good. I think Jones looks very good for a rookie for the Giants, but he's going to be facing the toughest defense he's faced so far. He did a good job against Tampa Bay, whose defense isn't that terrible, even though they gave up points to the Rams. But the total on this game is open 46, and they've bet it down to 45.
And Barkley's absence, is he a point player, Jack?
I believe so. I mean, but they beat Tampa Bay basically without him for a half a game, and they handled Washington easily without him for a game. So, yeah, I would say initially it might have been a point and a half, and I'll say it's down to maybe a half a point now.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. Now, New England is at Washington, and you just kind of went through the Redskins a little bit. And yesterday, Tom Brady, he had himself a long afternoon. At 14.5 most markets, bookmakers got 15 and 44. I would think the Patriots will want to get that offense cranking again. And that's no one-off. You and I, Jack, spoke last week. Buffalo's defense has had and the Patriots still win the games. I mean, that didn't change. But Buffalo, that defense is the real McCoy because Brady, he literally had one drive, and after that, he couldn't get a first down the rest of the game. And it's shocking, right, that we said the safe play in a Patriots game is probably the under because those two defenses are the real McCoy. I don't know how Washington scores against these guys, and I think the Patriots offense is probably pissed off.
I would think so. I mean, as you said, New England averaging in the high 300s on offense yardage-wise. They went in yesterday and got 224 yards on offense against Buffalo. But I'm going to say Buffalo is just that good on defense. Now, Washington's giving up probably close to over 400 yards a game. So it's going to be New England's day all the way. They opened 13. They're up to 15. And it probably stays in that range. You know, I mean, maybe it comes back to 14 just because most big dogs get bet down.
All right, then let's go to the Jets and the Eagles. And the Jets maybe walking into a buzzsaw here because Philly gets extra time to prepare.
They do. And Philadelphia, with the thought process that Darnold was still out, we opened Philadelphia 14 and 44.5. The game is currently down because he's getting reevaluated, I believe, today. And he could be back at practice and starting this weekend, or he could be ruled out for another week or two. So the difference in this game would be, I think if Darnold played, it would be Philadelphia 11. And if it came down to him being out and Luke Jackson playing, I think it would be like 16-6.
And, just how quickly, the playing field can change where the Cowboys, are this juggernaut and they come out of the gate, unbeaten team. They come up short against the Saints. Eagles are 2-2, but all of a sudden now just they found their groove, and that's a huge win for them in the Thursday night game, to the point where basically, when they bump into the Cowboys, they're within a game now, right? You win that game and you're the division leader. So Philly, to me, I think, is a team. We best be considering, the power rating. Watch them closely, because they were a mash unit, had a legitimate excuse in the loss to the Lions, then had a short week and showed a lot of guts. But slowly they're getting guys back. The other thing is, Jack, the running back by committee thing, to me, is a nightmare, and they've used that for years. The difference this time around, Howard and the Sanders kid from Penn State, I think they're the real deal. And I think this two-headed monster can really do some damage with fresh legs in there and guys that can bust it anytime they get it.
I think that's a good point. I think they have two very good runners. Peterson is inclined to be, as an offensive coach, is inclined to favor the passing game. So he's always, as you said, he never really had the horses, so he did the by committee. And now he's got it down to, as you referred to them, the two-headed monster. And it's worked for some other teams in the past. And I think it'll work very well for Philadelphia. Offensively, they're very good.
All right, talk to me about the Tampa Bay New Orleans game, where you were. Then we see Tampa do what they did to the Rams. What impact did it have, the number, on what you had before the game was played, where we sit now?
We opened the Saints at 5.5 and 47. Currently, it's 4 minus 15 and 47.5. Tampa Bay's good showing against the Rams was part of it. And also, as we looked again, and Teddy Bridgewater, if you watch that game last night, he can only complete the very short passes. Trouble with everything else. And I think this Tampa Bay, if they picked off Goff a few times and rushed him, I think they're going to be able to do the same thing to Mr. Bridgewater.
Well, so I'm curious, with the up and down nature, I would say, of both teams, was this a harder number to make than others?
No, not at all. I think Tampa Bay, again, New Orleans with a big home field, we're basically saying these two teams are even. New Orleans might join Seattle. Maybe they're a 3.5 point favorite, 3.5 point advantage at home. So this game is close to pick. I think it goes down to 3.5. And I think Tampa Bay with Winston, I would take Winston over Bridgewater in a heartboot. And I think that'll be the difference in the game.
Yeah. Kamara's been a stud, by the way. They count on him so much now. Boy, he's electric. I wonder if he wears down, but he's a special player. Atlanta and Houston. Houston's another one of these teams where there's tons of talent and the play calling. They're a bizarre bunch. In Atlanta, I don't know. Something just seems really, really off with the Falcons. What was the thought process here on the number?
Well, again, it's two underachieving teams.
Yeah.
And Houston, we opened 3.5 and 49.5. And that was basically our assessment. Now it's gone up to 5, so there's been a little money for Houston, nothing major. And it'll probably, again, much like the Carolina game, stayed in that 5-point area for most of the week last week. I think this will stay right there because no one knows what to make of either team. Houston, they put up, in their first game, they put up 414 yards. Since then, 263, 376, and 264. They're not setting the world on fire.
Well, here's one, and I know you're waiting a little bit for some information in what will be put up there. Buffalo at Tennessee. I would think this is not a game for the faint of heart. I think these are two really good defenses, and Buffalo, I've got to believe that they're without Allen. And they have a bye next week. I think it would behoove Buffalo to not play Josh Allen. He was out cold, knocked out cold in that game. So Matt Barkley could very well be the starter. But Tennessee, impressive road win at Atlanta. What were you thinking before the weekend? This one should be really interesting.
Prior, on Saturday, we posted this game, Tennessee 2.5 and 38. And if they were to play today and you told me who the starting quarterback was, it would be Tennessee would probably be 3 and 39 with Allen in there, and anywhere up to, let's say, 7 with Matt Barkley starting. And that may be a little overreaching on it. Maybe 6 would be a better number with him out.
Okay, no, it's a fair question to ask. The one thing is, Matt Barkley actually has looked good for Buffalo. He beat the Jets off the street last year, but I think they put up 41 points, and he moved the ball every bit as good as Allen did yesterday against the Patriots, and got hit and picked off on the final drive. But boy, Buffalo's defense, they played their lungs out in that game. They deserved a better fate. A blocked punt ended up being the difference. The one sneaky one, Jack, that I no way it'd be worth anything in relation to the number, but I think there's a real good chance that the rookie running back Devin Singletary, who's missed the last 2 games for the Bills, will return, and I think that is a big help to Buffalo if he were to come back.
I think it would be a +2, and we'll find out if he is back or not. We'll certainly have everyone look into it.
Denver and the Chargers. Oh, we were talking before we started recording. This Denver team's just got to really, what do we got to do?
And I don't know what they have to do. They have to get some luck on their side would help. That defense that they're all so proud of one was a controversial loss to the Bears where there was time should have run out and it didn't. And last week, Jacksonville just drove down the field and scored on them. So we have Denver and the Chargers. The Chargers defense is suspect. Denver offense, I might put them in that same category. So we opened Chargers 6.5 and 44. It still sits at 6.5, 44 under 15. I think 7's a take, and anything less, they may go down to 6, 5.5. But 7's a take, and anything else is just there all week.
When you see a number like this very early on, are the odds pretty? And it's 6.5 minus a dime either way. Is from your end of things, the general belief is at some point we'll see some 7s and then there'll be buyback. Is that the best guess?
Right. Generally, if you go to 7 and someone you respect takes it, then it's going to take 2 or 3 times what it took the next time to go back to 7.
Now, Green Bay and Dallas. You got the Pack with extra time to prepare off a hard-fought game. Dallas in a physical game against the Saints turns around and now has to face Aaron Rodgers. Was this an easy one to make, or does the extra time for the Packers, does it mean anything to the number? And if not, should it?
The extra time is a bonus, and that's why we opened at 4 and 48, and then now we're at 4. And actually, as I'm speaking to you, the game just went to 3.5 and 47. I think the big question is Devontae Adams. He got hurt in Thursday's game, and it would be a big factor one way or the other. If Green Bay had many chances to tie that game up or win it, and you can't prove that he would have scored down there, but there would have been differences on defense where perhaps Rodgers could have taken advantage of it. So
then we go to Indy and Kansas City, and I guess as you watch and you got to try to sort out what you're actually dealing with. What have you made of Brissett so far?
An NFL quarterback, not much more. I think if he had an option in his contract and Luck had played this year, he might have been out starting for one of these other teams that's going to be in search of a quarterback. He's an NFL quarterback, perhaps only a journeyman, but I have no problem with him starting. If I was in trouble and my team needed somebody, he'd be the first one I'd call.
So I guess the big question, because they're on a bye, so we don't really get to talk about them. Detroit, literally, they had Kansas City beat yesterday, and they fumble at the 1-inch line going in, and a 100-yard touchdown the other way, and Detroit ends up being down 7 instead of up 7. Then they fight all the way back and get the win. That game yesterday really was I think the definition of why they play the game, and they're not machines, right? They're human beings. Kansas City, they were there at the end and found a way, but that was Detroit's game, in retrospect. But you never know, right?
Well, the second half, Detroit goes down right away. Stafford fumbles on the inside the 10. Then they go right down again, and they have that big 14-point swing. And ironically, the crew that worked that game for refereeing was the same crew that worked the Rams and the Saints when they whistled the touchdown no good. So I think from their lesson, they let it go. And then once there was a touchdown on the field, they couldn't really reverse it.
This Kansas City team, it's a video game, Jack. I mean, how inflated are their totals?
I don't think they're inflated at all. They reflect what this team does. In other words, for this game coming up the next Sunday night. We opened at 54. It's up to 57 based on Kansas City generally doesn't have to play the whole game. So when you look at their average number of points scored, it's not like they've been pressed like they were yesterday against Detroit to play the whole game. They're probably going to score in the low 30s without being pressed. And if they had to play 60 minutes in a very difficult game, they'd be in the high 30s.
And, listen, this Cleveland team, all the hype, we talked about this group, and I got one right this past week, Jack, in that, talk to me in 5 weeks if they play that game again. But that was nothing more yesterday than a scheduling situation where the Browns, literally the division would have been over. The division would have been won had Baltimore won that game yesterday, and then Cleveland had to go play San Fran off a bye. That was Cleveland literally playing that game like it was a playoff game yesterday. In week 4, believe me, the division, the AFC North, would have been decided had the Browns lost that game yesterday. To their credit, they went in there kind of realizing that, and they had the sense of urgency. Now, a tough task, cross-country, off a team that's feeling their oats off a bye.
Very difficult spot. We have San Francisco as 3 favorite, 3 minus a quarter, basically 3.5. We opened at 5 and 47. The good performance yesterday drove it down with some money. But you said San Francisco has the advantage of coming off a bye. They're 3-0. I think sometimes a team on a bye is more dangerous if they were 1-2 or 2-1. 3-0, sometimes it can go to your head. But Cleveland's going to have their hands full going cross country, playing a rested team, and it should be a good game. I don't envision it running like San Francisco to 6 or anything like that. I think 3.5, it'll bounce back and forth.
I would say to you, and your point is well taken about the bye, where you think it's a benefit. I don't think it's a benefit in week 5. I mean, when you're 3-0 and you are feeling your oats, plus, you're still relatively healthy. Anybody gets a bye like this. Now San Francisco's got a gauntlet the rest of the way. I think the bye, if anything, is a minor disservice to them.
Right. It disrupts the rhythm that you have going. And we'll see if it affects them.
And then the report card as we wrap it up, Jack, you said it was a good weekend for the house.
It was the best so far in this short season.
The Bills covering and the Lions covering, I would think, were probably the two that
they were the two best on straight bet results. Naturally, the Rams going down in teasers and even Baltimore going down in teasers. That sort of made the day.
It might have been a record-setting weekend had Buffalo or Detroit won those games outright.
I think it might have been the best ever if that had happened, but
and you were live in both of them.
Definitely had shots.
Oh, man.
We'll take the same result next weekend if we can do it.
As always, we love going behind the counter and into the war room and get the thoughts from the Oddsmaker. And Jack breaks it down for us great each and every Monday right here. Jack, I appreciate your time as always. Have a great week. We look forward to chatting you again next week.
The pleasure was all mine.
Great stuff from Jack from BookMaker. Looking ahead to week 5 in the NFL.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and the BetMaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.